Some of you may have seen recently that I've been doing some testing with GPT-5 and the model was so good that I decided to give it a challenge. So I have this application that I've been building called WordLight. It's a pretty complicated application with lots of features and layers, but I gave the model a task that, in my experience, takes engineering teams weeks and really often even months to complete. It's the kind of thing that no one would take on lightly, and honestly, this wasn't planned as a video or anything specific like that. I just had some time, the model was impressive, and I was curious. So the model went away and worked for about 6 hours, came back with 20,000 lines of changes across about 150 files, and when I turned it on, it worked perfectly. So I want to talk you through exactly what happened because there was one moment in particular that really surprised me, and I think it tells us something about where these models are actually headed. Let me show you the application first. So this is something like a dictionary, if you will, to keep it very, very simple. But this is a pretty complicated application you'll see in a second. And I just want to show you a few things. There's like 20 major feature areas and different types of things. For example, there's a whole series of slash commands of different kinds of lookups that you can do. So if I look into serendipity, we can of course, get the description of it and play the sounds and get synonyms and antonyms. So you can see that we have an etymology here, where the word came from, kind of its origins, and kind of breaking it apart. And this was an important aspect to me to say, I want to be able to break down the word to understand it. I was looking up fire using the slang slash command. So what it'll give us is kind of the slang definition of fire. And also it has kind of this mechanism to show somebody using the term. This edit is fire, the timing is on beat is crazy. It says this video is really well made and satisfying to watch. What the word usage has looked like over time. All of this kind of stuff is buried in this. As you can tell, it's very, very dense. But if we go back to something like serendipity, come back to these here, this etymology, I want to describe something here. So you can see I've broken it into the word parts as we've talked about, and they have kind of little outlines or colors to identify the different word parts. That's really important, but that's not actually written down anywhere. It's right here. This is the definition of it. And though this seems great, the problem is that this is the definition of that feature. So let's talk about why that's a problem. Okay, so here's the thing. In any application that's complicated enough, the why behind how things look and work kind of gets buried in the UI like we just saw. And it happens kind of so gradually that no one notices. I've spent a lot of my career building systems that needed to work across multiple platforms, TV, mobile, desktop, web. And in that world, this separation isn't optional. You learn the hard way that if you don't pull the intent out of the UI, you're rebuilding everything from scratch every time you need a new expression of the same application. So here's an example. Let's say early on, a designer decides that usernames in your application should always be displayed bold and all caps. And it becomes kind of part of the system's identity. In fact, maybe part of your company identity. Let's say it's on the bill that you send customers. It's on every screen. It's in the communications that you send through email. Years later, a mobile team decides to rebuild the application for this new mobile experience. And they get together a whole bunch of the people that have built the previous applications, the desktop application or the web application, and they start asking about all of those features. And one of them they ask is asking about why these usernames are capitalized. And nobody really remembers why they're capitalized. They just always have been. And so they're always just saying I'm just following the standards that were set before. So the mobile team has their own patterns, of course. And since nobody can say exactly why these things are capitalized, they don't carry it over. And nobody knows that they just discarded an intentionally identifying decision that was baked into every surface of the product. That's how intent gets lost, not because someone made a bad call, but because nobody documented the why. And the UI code was the only place it lived. And here's where it matters for what we're talking about today. If humans who built the system lose track of why something works a certain way, an AI has absolutely no chance, right? If you want an AI to help you modernize or redesign an application, it needs to know the why, not just what's on the screen, intent, not expression. And that's the core of the problem. So knowing all of this, I decided to try just this. So the actual task was take the entire application and fully extract all UI concerns from all business logic, all the intent, basically across the whole thing. A clean separation with a complete test suite to prove nothing broke. All right. So the idea, as we're talking about, I want to be able to have business rules on one side or all of the logic and intention on one side, and whatever face I decide to put on it should be easy to plug into it, right? This was the request that I gave it, not terribly large, but basically what I just said. And then I just put it to work. All of this happened in a single session, so I didn't have to clear new sessions and start over any, and it just kept condensing and working. So the numbers were something like 12 hours of wall clock time and about 6 hours of actual model time. Now, here's where it gets kind of crazy. 300 million tokens were used with 34 commits. The babysitting pattern, though, it wasn't fully autonomous. I had to nudge it about 25 times over 12 hours. So we're really talking about once an hour or so. We had 3 or 4 back and forths, me saying, wait, are you finished? That's surprising. And it would come back and say, oh, no, I just finished phase 2. Would you like me to continue? And I'd say, yeah, I want you to finish all of the work, all of the phases, document your work, run your test cases, but you don't need me, pretend I'm not here. And then it would come back about an hour later on the dot and say, hey, I'm done. And I'd say, are you really done? So that was pretty irritating. That was a surprising finding. But other than that one thing, and that's why it was 12 hours on the clock, and really 6 hours of work time. The interesting thing about all of this is the quality of what it was producing was remarkable. And before it even started working, there was something in its plan that honestly just stopped me. All right, if we look at some of the very first responses that I got back from the model, you can see it says, your instinct is right. This is not just a pretty shell around a lookup. There's a sizable product surface area, and a lot of the current experience is encoded in custom component structures and store boundaries. And this is exactly what I'm talking about, that a lot of the decisions and intention is actually basically in the UI itself. And then this is the amazing part. So it obviously saw that these things were actually married together far too tightly, which very commonly happens as we've covered, but it needed to figure out a clean way to separate it that it could prove. And that was an actual important detail that it found very important. And by the way, this is the big reveal to me. It said it needs to force 3 radically different interface directions before touching the production UI. For example, a conversation verse stack, a field journal notebook, and a card atlas constellation explorer ban the current Spotlight layout from those 3 explorations, and then extract a headless application layer from the shell, which basically means be able to run the application without any of the UI running, which is fantastic from a test case scenario. That really will strengthen all of our test cases. And also a very good, clean way to imagine this separation is build a headless version, and then you'll be able to put any UI on it that you want. But it's saying that it was going to build 3 different interfaces itself. And this is 3 different UIs that it did decide to build to prove out that its separation was correct. Now, I've done these separations in the past, and very often you will have a new target that you're shooting for. That new target is really the proof that your separation is occurring correctly. But really going against 3 different UIs, that's just brilliant. And the fact that, of course, it didn't cost me anything extra, maybe it did cost me something extra, but very little comparatively in how fast it could do it. The proof that it can do and the test cases that it can do for all of these different UIs against this one headless application layer is just a brilliant thing that I did not expect for it to do. If anything, I would have expected that somebody like me would have to give that direction to the system so that it would better be able to write the test suite. All right, so let's just get this thing running so that we can see what it came up with after it was done. And so this is the application after it was rewritten in the same Spotlight UI that we were using. If we go into these different items, okay, so we get the results very similar to what we were seeing before, if not identical. All right, so with that, let's switch into another one of its kind of designs. All right, so this is the notebook look. That's great. Here's all the previous words that we've had that we can come in and pull up. We can search for new words, do the slash commands like we did before. So all of that's great. It looks pretty different, but at the very least, all of these components actually are quite different, and it does keep some of the elements that we wanted to keep. In fact, the vast majority of the display inside of the application itself looks exactly the same. And I would say this is a great scenario that it couldn't separate what the intent was versus render rules. If it kept it exactly the same, it just erred on the side of everything that's rendering must have been very important. I'd frankly prefer that to it just throwing everything away thinking all of that must have just been for render rules. So then I would have to come back to this and try to describe that intent back in. This is actually, to me, a pretty good example of the problem that we were describing before. So let's try the other one that it created. I think it was desk. Now, desk, I will say, is great. I'm glad they were thinking outside of the box. I think these are notes that are set up in strange orientations on your desk blotter or something like that is the way that they describe it. However, what I will say here is you can see the similarity starting to sneak in, right? Everything has the same rounded corners. Everything is kind of rectangles in rectangles or rounded rectangles in rectangles. This is something that I find with the GPT model in general. What I want to do is put this through the paces of a real design system and see what we can do to it when we have an opportunity to be a little bit more creative with our designs. What I want to cover here is this is kind of exactly what I would have done. Every time I've taken a job like this kind of work on, and I've done this multiple times, I build a second UI, as I mentioned, because you'd never pay for this kind of effort, how long it actually takes to do, if you were just doing it to create a better architecture for an application that already worked. What you will end up doing is looking at a new target and saying, we need to rebuild it so that we can use the single code base across multiple UIs. The model arrived at that same conclusion independently and then gave me an enormous amount of confidence in kind of the rigor that it was bringing to the rest of the work. An enormous amount of test cases and everything else went into this that it was describing ad nauseum by the end. The original application, it just worked when we turned it back on. Think of it as like having a crew come in while you're out, repaint the whole room, put everything back exactly where it was, and you come home and you can't tell the difference. That's really what just happened here. I was honestly so impressed that the next day I gave the exact same task to Claude Opus, partly to validate the results and partly because I was curious how a different model would approach it. And Opus did finish much quicker. It was 2 hours straight through, one shot, no nudging. It didn't need me to babysit, so very different in that way, but it used 1/10 of the tokens and the application looked the same afterwards. It worked, but there was one launch error right when I started it that I had to get fixed, which tells me that the test coverage wasn't as thorough because it would have run into that had it been starting the application. And it didn't build validation UIs, so I really couldn't verify that the separation was done in the same way with the same rigor. And these are genuinely different approaches. And that's what's interesting to me about this and why I wanted to share it. GPT-5.4 was more exhaustive, more changes, more tests, the validation UIs, the massive token spend, of course. Opus was surgical, less disruption, and faster, but less proof that the separation was clean and would leave me to go back in and dive into a lot more to prove that it works. Both got a working application. The question isn't which is better, it's that they approached the same massive problem in a genuinely different way, and I think that tells you something about how these models reason about large-scale work right now. And then I gave them both the same follow-up, a loosely described redesign, and I'll be honest, they both struggled with it. Design, as we mentioned, is really still hard. It's an unsolved problem for these models still. So here's what I keep coming back to. The separation of intent from expression isn't new. This is a problem engineers have been dealing with for as long as applications have existed. What's new is that AI can now do the surgery. It can take a system that's been built up over years, where the why is kind of buried in to all of the how, and tease them apart with enough rigor that you end up with something that works identically, but is fundamentally more flexible. And once that separation exists, the doors that open, the new designs, new platforms, new expressions of the same application, those are genuinely interesting. And actually, there's a tool called Pencil that's been getting a lot of buzz recently. It's an AI native design tool that works right inside of VS Code. And most of the examples I'm seeing are for brand new applications, kind of greenfield stuff. But what about something that already exists? What about something like WordLight? Does this kind of separation that we just did make that possible? That's the question I'm digging into right now, and I want to give it enough time to really understand how useful it can be because I think that there's something here. If you want to see where that goes, subscribe. I'll see you there. And I do want to say hello to the many new subscriptions that we've gotten in our community here recently. Thanks for joining. I am going to be sharing a lot of these kinds of ideas going forward and really my thoughts on AI in general. So stick around. There's more to come. Thanks for coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.